When I first bought the house, I was filled with a sense of pride and excitement. It was my first home, a small place that had been on the market for a while. It needed some work. Nothing too major, just a few repairs and a fresh coat of paint. But that didn't bother me. I was ready to make it my own, to turn it into a space that felt like mine. The house was everything I had been looking for. It had character, history, and enough space for all the things I'd collected over the years. The previous owners had left some furniture behind, old pieces that added to the home's antique charm. There was an attic too, which I planned to use for storage once I had gone through all the boxes I had brought with me. The first few days were a whirlwind of unpacking and organizing. I spent most of my time downstairs, getting the kitchen and living room set up, and only ventured into the attic to drop off boxes of things I didn't need right away. The attic was a large, dusty space with exposed beams and a single small window that let in just enough light to see by during the day. It was cluttered with old furniture, paintings, and other odds and ends that the previous owners hadn't bothered to take with them. I didn't think much of it at first. The attic was just another part of the house, and I was too focused on getting everything else in order to worry about it. But that changed on the third night. It started with a noise. I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from above. It was so quiet I thought I was imagining it, but as I lay there, straining to listen, the sound grew louder, more distinct. It was coming from the attic. I sat up in bed, my heart starting to race. I told myself it was probably just a rat or some other small animal that had found its way inside. Old houses like this were bound to have pests, and I hadn't had a chance to check the attic thoroughly yet. But there was something about the sound that made my skin crawl. Something that didn't feel right. I tried to ignore it, to tell myself it was nothing, but the noise continued, persistent and unrelenting. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep unless I checked it out, so I reluctantly got out of bed and grabbed a flashlight. The house was eerily silent as I made my way to the attic stairs, the only sound the creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet. When I reached the door, I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Part of me wanted to turn around, to go back to bed and pretend I hadn't heard anything, but I knew I couldn't. I opened the door and the scratching sound grew louder, echoing down the stairs. My heart was pounding in my chest as I climbed the narrow steps, the beam of my flashlight cutting through the darkness. When I reached the top, I shone the light around the attic, searching for the source of the noise. But the scratching continued. I followed the sound, weaving my way through the maze of boxes and furniture until I reached the far corner of the attic. There, hidden behind a stack of old paintings, was a small wooden door I hadn't noticed before. The door was old, the wood warped and splintered, and it looked like it hadn't been opened in years. The scratching sound was coming from behind it, faint but insistent, like something was trying to get out. I reached for the doorknob, my hand trembling, and slowly turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, narrow passageway that led to a small, hidden room. My flashlight flickered, the beam casting long shadows across the floor as I stepped inside. The room was small, barely big enough to stand in, and the walls were lined with old, faded wallpaper. The air was thick and musty, the smell almost overpowering. In the center of the room was a single, small bed, the sheets tattered and stained with age. But what caught my attention was the figure sitting on the bed. It was a woman, her skin pale and sickly, her hair matted and unkempt. She was hunched over, her back to me, and she was scratching at the wall, her fingers digging into the plaster. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This wasn't just an animal or a figment of my imagination. This was real. I wanted to run, but I was unable to tear my eyes away from the figure in front of me, and then she turned around. Her eyes were wild, filled with a madness that sent a jolt of terror through me. Her face was gaunt, her cheeks hollow, and her lips were cracked and dry. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and filled with a desperation that made my blood run cold. She stared at me for a moment, her chest heaving as if she was struggling to breathe, and then, without warning, she lunged at me. I stumbled back, barely managing to dodge her as she clawed at the air, her fingers twisted and gnarled. She was screaming, a high-pitched, inhuman sound that echoed through the attic, filling the space with a sense of pure, unbridled terror. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest as I raced down the stairs, her screams still ringing in my ears. I didn't stop until I reached the front door, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the lock. When I finally got the door open, I ran outside, the cold night air hitting me like a slap in the face. I kept running until I was halfway down the street, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my mind reeling with what I had just seen. I didn't go back inside that night. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in my car staring at the house, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The woman in the attic, who was she? How long had she been there? And why hadn't I noticed the hidden room before? I didn't have any answers, but I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't stay in that house. The next morning, I called the police. I didn't know how to explain what had happened, but I knew I couldn't go back into the house alone. When the officers arrived, I led them to the attic, my heart pounding in my chest as we climbed the stairs. The house was eerily silent, the only sound the creaking of the floorboards beneath our feet. I pointed out the hidden door, my hands trembling as I explained what I had seen. The officers exchanged a glance, their expressions skeptical, but they didn't say anything. They opened the door, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they stepped inside. The room was just as I had left it, small, cramped, and filled with the smell of decay. But the woman was gone. The bed was empty, the sheets still tattered and stained, but there was no sign of her. The officers searched the room, checking every corner, but there was nothing there. They didn't find any evidence of someone living in the attic, no sign that the woman had ever been there. They told me it was probably just a squatter, someone who had broken into the house and then fled when they realized I had moved in. But I knew that wasn't true. The woman I had seen wasn't just a squatter. There was something wrong with her, something that couldn't be explained by logic or reason. The police left after a few hours, telling me to call if I saw anything else unusual, but I could tell they didn't believe me. They thought I was just a nervous new homeowner, spooked by the old house and its creaks and groans. But I knew what I had seen, and I knew that she was still out there, somewhere. I tried to stay in the house after that, tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that the woman in the attic was just a figment of my imagination, but the fear never went away. Every night I would lie in bed, straining to hear the slightest noise, the faintest scratch. The house was silent, but I could feel her presence, like a shadow lurking just out of sight. I started having nightmares, vivid, terrifying dreams where I was trapped in the attic, the woman's twisted face inches from mine, her hands clawing at my skin. I would wake up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, the fear so real that I could still feel it long after I had woken up. I knew I couldn't stay in the house any longer. The fear was too much, the sense of dread too overwhelming. I packed up my things, leaving most of it behind, and moved out within a week. I never went back. I don't know what happened to the woman in the attic or how long she had been there. Maybe she was a ghost, or maybe she was something else, something that defied explanation. But whatever she was, I hoped she was gone. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying in bed, I can still hear the faint sound of scratching, the soft creak of a door opening. And I wonder, just for a moment, if she's still out there, waiting for someone else to find her. If these stories gave you chills, don't forget to smash that like button and share the fear with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for more bone-chilling tales and hit the notification bell so you never miss a nightmarish new upload. Have your own haunted house experience? Drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. Remember, every home has its secrets. Stay safe and sleep with one eye open. See you in the next nightmare.